Okay, so for today, what I'll do is I'm going to create a new project. And this project, I'll use actually a very simple template. I'm going to use the console application because I want to teach you entity framework, and I don't want to waste time talking about buttons and this, that, and let's keep it simple. So I'm going to use a console application, and let me browse and put it somewhere where I can find it. I'll probably put it under, I have a folder called scrap here. So I'll call it the entity, the EF for entity framework, the EF world. That's what I'll call it. It's a simple command line application. Okay, and while it's doing that, I want to introduce you to something called LINQ. And LINQ is a syntax that Microsoft uses in C# that facilitates iterating through collections. It's not only C#, you also find it in VB.NET, and you find it in F#, and so on and so forth. So what is LINQ? Okay, so LINQ, LINQ, it stands for Language Independent Queries. Okay? And it is used extensively in entity framework. So before I even connect to a database and I do all that stuff, I want to emphasize to you that LINQ is something you can use with any collection. And the beauty of LINQ is that it allows you to do like wheres and order bys and this kind of stuff. So I'm going to create a simple class, and I call it the team class. And the team class is, it's supposed to reflect the domain of hockey and the hockey teams and the NHL and all that stuff. So I'm going to add a new class here, but I'll add a folder called models. Okay, and in that models folder, I'm going to add a class that I'm just going to simply call team. Add. Okay, and I'll make this, in fact, I don't even need to make it public, because over here in today's lesson, I have this team class here. So I'm just going to copy this. It just saves me having to type it. I'll copy this and put it into my project. And I'm going to replace this team class with this class here. So if we look at the team class, what have we got? These are the properties. It's got the team name, the city, the province, and the salary cap. Let me resolve this. Now I have list, okay, of team. I think when I copied this, it got rid of the tag. List of team. Okay, this is what you need to fix. Just put the type of list here. Okay, so I'm creating about 4 different hockey teams: the Canucks, the Oilers, the Flames, the Leafs, and maybe we can add one more. Let's say the Senators, and they're in Ottawa and Ontario. Okay, and their salary cap maybe 45,000 or something. So here we are. We have a collection. Okay, now let me use that and just show you what LINQ is. So over here, let me create a private static void. In fact, let me expand this. Void method called display teams. Okay, so here I'm going to instantiate. I'm not going to instantiate. I'm going to iterate through this teams collection. So I can say var query equals to the team class. Now this team class, I need to resolve it. And I'm going to see team dot, and I've got our get teams method here, right? Okay, and I can say dot where, and then I can say t dot team name equals to Canucks. Okay, that's one of the team names. And I can say here select, no, I shouldn't put a semicolon there, dot select t. Okay, let me just indent this. Now I'm actually getting all the teams and filtering out the connects. So now I can actually display this. So I can go console dot write line. Let me put here some formatting. Comma. No, I need to iterate through this. Wait, I can say for each var item in query, and then finish this off. Okay, here, and then in here I'm going to display I dot the team name, comma, I dot the city. Okay, so I just wrote a method, so now I want to call this method from the main method. So I'll just say display teams. Okay, and if I run this, there's some build errors. Let's find out what the problem is. So I think I'm missing a brace here. So you can see here, I got the connects. Okay. Now you can do other things. Instead of saying where, I can say order by. Dot order by t dot city. I can order by the city. Let's run this again. You see, it's ordering by city, which is Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver. Now, this kind of syntax is called lambda. So let me actually rename this to lambda. Display teams using lambda syntax. Okay. So in LINQ you have this sort of lambda expression, and then there's another syntax which is more like SQL-like. SQL-like syntax. I'll copy this. Copy. And I'll say display teams using, instead of lambda, I'll say using, say, SQL-like syntax. Okay? SQL-like syntax. I think I can't do this. What am I doing wrong here? Okay, I can't put a hyphen. I could have put an underscore. Anyways, this is SQL-like, so I want to change this. So what I can do here is I can say from t in team dot get teams. I'll do the same thing that I did there. I can say order by t dot city select t. Okay, so let me call this method instead of this one here. Okay, so let me run this. It will give me the same thing. So these two syntaxes are a little different. Okay, this one, let me compare these two. In fact, let me eliminate some of these spaces so that you can see them. Yeah, you see these two?
I still have it.
This is SQL-like, and this is, it's got some SQL-like, but it's using something called lambda expressions. Now, you're familiar with SQL, most of you, or all of you. You've done SQL statements. And you might find this looks like SQL, but it's different. It's different in the sense that what LINQ is, it is SQL turned upside down. With SQL, you tend to say select so-and-so from, you put the from at the end, the table goes at the end. What Microsoft did was they brought the table information at the beginning. In so doing, they're able to provide IntelliSense. You see? IntelliSense, when I determine the table or the collection at the beginning, then I can put some IntelliSense here. I can order by province. So the fact that I know what the table is, it provides me with the information here that allows me to sort. Okay? So now this is like an intro into what LINQ is. With LINQ, you can do order by, you can, mostly it's for collections, but in this case, this has nothing to do with the database. This is just a simple collection. So you can take any collection, an array, a list, any kind of collection, and you can iterate through it using LINQ. So now let us do something different. Instead of messing around with a collection, let us now talk to a real database. So we're going to use Entity Framework. I'm going to comment this out, and let's go in the models folder here, and I'm going to add a new item, and this item will be an entity framework. So in the filter here, you can enter the filter entity, or you can click on data here on the left hand side, and entity data models right at the top. Now I'm going to connect to the Northwind database. So I will call this, instead of model 1, I'm going to call it Northwind model, because it's a bad idea just to use model 1, model 2, because it doesn't really help you to understand what you're doing. So I'm going to call this Northwind model. So we add this. Now, we will learn later on that you can build an entity framework model that is based on a database that already exists, or you can have a model that with the model you can produce a database, and that's called code first development. It's probably a topic that we're going to talk about, say, in 2 or 3 weeks. But this is database development, database first development. So we have a database, we want to connect to it. So I'm going to click next here, and then I'm going to choose new connection, and I'll enter those credentials that I mentioned to you before. The database server is max.bcit.ca, and I'm going to use SQL Server authentication. So I'll enter the SQL Server authentication credentials. Get this right. And I'll save the password. Now, if everything is correct, don't forget to check save password, because otherwise it's going to prompt you whenever it tries to go to the database, or it's just going to bump, and you won't know why. So after a while, after it sort of authenticates, this down arrow will populate with the databases that this particular credential has access to. And I'm going to choose Northwind and click on next, on OK. Now this page shows up, and then you have a radio box that you have to click here, which basically is a disclaimer. It says, I'm going to add your credentials or your password into the configuration file. Do you agree? And you say, yes, I agree. And down here it says it's going to save the connection string in the app.config file, and it's going to give it this name. So the app.config file in command line applications in C#, it's just an XML file where they save settings, informations. So if I actually say next here, it's going to ask me which version of entity framework do you want to use. I want to use the latest and the greatest, which is this one. So I'll keep it at that and move to next. At this point, it's actually sucking in all the tables from the database. And these are all the tables that we have in the database. These are all the views that we have. And these are all the stored procedures that we have. Okay? So what I'll do is, I'm going to just, for the moment, to keep it simple, I'm just going to select one table from the database, the categories table, just to keep it simple. I'll click on finish here. Okay? So now it's going to build this model. It takes a bit of time. What it's actually doing is it's creating an XML file, what we call an EDMX file. An EDMX file that represents the tables and the relationships for those objects that I selected. So it is spinning around here. We'll wait until it finishes. It should go faster than that. I will sip here. So here's the model. It has only one entity. Okay? And if you look at this, it's got 4 columns, this particular table. This last column is a picture, which I'm going to ignore today because I'm working in a command line and I'm just going to ignore it. Now down here, it's got the so-called navigation properties. So if there's a relationship between this entity and another entity, it will be shown right there. But because I just chose one entity, there is no relationship. So it's blank. So after you create this model, it's a good idea to compile. Because if you don't compile, this model will not be known to your environment. So I will do a quick compile. I normally compile by doing Control-Shift-B, which is the equivalent of build the solution, Control-Shift-B. I just know how to do it from the keyboard. You can do it from the UI. Now let's go back and have a look at this app.config file. This is the XML file I told you that contains the configuration information. And the connection string will have been saved here. Okay? So here in the north, here's the connection string. Okay? Oops. So now, let's use this database. When you create a command line application, it creates for you this program.cs, which we used before. Now I'm going to create another method here that's going to query the database for all the categories that it has. So I'll create another method here, private static void, and I'll call it display categories using SQL-like syntax, just so that we can make it look different. Okay, now, before I go there, let's see what it did actually. It created this model. Under models, I have this thing called Northwind model.edmx. If you go to the file system, you can open this file using a text editor like Notepad++ or Notepad and so on, and you'll see that it's nothing but an XML file. But I'm not going to go there because I don't even touch that. I don't go and touch it. You don't need to touch it. Now, if you expand that under this folder, Northwind Model TT, okay, here is our entity, category.cs. This is what it created to represent the category table. You'll see that it's a very simple class. This is what we call a POCO. POCO is plain old CLR object. The Java folks, they have something called a POJO, a plain old Java object. So you can see this is very simple. There's nothing to it. 4 columns. Okay? And there's another class that's important. and it is this one here, Northwind model context.cs. Even though the file is called Northwind model context, the actual class is called Northwind entities. This is a very important class because this is the class that's an entry point into the model. It is the context class. It's referred to as the context class. So I need to know the name of this thing. And I'll show you in a moment that I have to instantiate one of these in order to get access to the other entities. So let's go back to the program.cs and let me build this. Now, to query the categories table, I need to instantiate this Northwind entities. Okay? Northwind entities, and I'll just call it db equals to new Northwind entities. And from here, I can use my LINQ statement to query that database table. I don't need to know anything about SQL. The reality is, if you know LINQ, you don't need to know anything about SQL. You don't care. So here I'm going to say var query equals to from db dot categories from, no, sorry, I made a mistake. From C in db dot categories, I can say select C. That will get me all the data in the categories table. Now I'll just iterate through it. So I'll just copy this just to save time. And we're going to display I dot, there is no team name. You can see there's an error there. So what there is there is I dot, there's a category ID, there's a category name, and let me add one more column. And comma, I'll say I dot description. I'm not going to display the picture. I don't need that, okay? So now let me execute this. See if it's going to work. Control F5. You see it went off and it got all these categories. Now, I seem to be bringing the picture column when I don't really need it, which is rather inefficient. Why am I bringing it? So you can selectively choose the columns that you want. And the way to do that is this. You can, instead of just saying get C, select C, you can say select new C dot category ID, comma, C dot category name, comma, C dot description. Okay? And let's say order by here, just for the fun of it. I can say order by C dot, let's say category name. So if I run this again, it will get me the same thing, but it's ordering it by category name. So you can see apple went to the top and seafood went to the bottom. Now, this is using the SQL-like syntax. Let me do the same thing using lambda syntax. So instead of SQL-like, I'm going to say lambda. And the lambda syntax will be something like this. See categories, and then here I'm going to say dot order by instead of this, and then here for the select I'll say select C new, and basically it will be this stuff here. So this is the same thing using lambda. And we'll do the same thing, just a different syntax. Why do people use lambda? Lambda expressions, they're good if you're lazy, if you don't want to type too much. It involves less typing. Okay? Now, as far as architecture is concerned, what we have done so far, if we just review what we did, first of all, I talked to you about using LINQ with plain, simple collections. And then we connected to a database, and using a command line application, we were able to get the model for the database and iterate through the categories table and so on and so forth. But if you're going to do this in your workplace, it's not a good idea to put your model inside with your main application. Models typically go into a class library. And the idea there is, if you have a class library and you put your model in a class library, then your different applications in the organization, they can use the same class library, and you maintain the class library in one place. For example, you might have a web application, you might have another service application, you might have a command line application, a Windows application, and if all of these are using the same model, then take that model, put it in a different library. So that's what I'm going to do. Over here, this is a command line application. In fact, I can rename this. Let me rename it to, I'll say, Entity Framework Command or Console Application. Okay, so it's a bit clear. This is Entity Framework Console Application. I'm going to create another project, and this time I'm going to use this class library, and I'll put the model in there. So I'm going to go and choose class library, and for this class library I'll call it Entity Framework, let's say, or let me call it Northwind Library. It's a class library. Okay, click on OK. Now when I create this, it creates for me a class.cs, class1.cs. I don't need that. I'm going to delete it. Now in here I'm going to add the model, just like I did before. I'm going to say add new item, and I'll filter on entity here. Entity. Okay, and I'll call this, just like I did before, North Wind Model. Okay, I'm just going to go through the same steps and choose the same category entity here. So after it's done, it's a good idea to do one compile here. At this point, I have the same model, but it's in a different class library, and you'll see even this class is the same, the category class is the same. So you know what? Maybe I should go back up here and delete this. I don't need it anymore. Okay, this is gone from the command or the console application. At this point, I probably broke everything. So when I do compile, I'm going to get a ton of errors. But actually, it's not a ton of errors, because all you need to do is you have to add a reference into the library from your console application. The way to do that is you right-click on references, you say add reference. Okay, and you choose the library, and you click on OK. So now we actually have a reference. How do we know that? Well, it put the Northwind Library DLL into the command line application, so it knows about it. At this point, I can come here and say resolve this, and it will find it. You see, it says using Northwind Library, so it found it. Now let's run, and I get an error. That shouldn't be, but I think I know how to fix it. What I do is I go to this app config in the library, and I grab the connection string. There must be a difference in the connection string. I grab that connection string, and then I'll put it into the config file of the console application. So what I'll do is I'm going to delete this. Sorry, here. Delete that, and then paste this here. There must be something different in the connection string. So if I run this now, it's going to work. Okay? Now, just to show you that this architecture is a better architecture, suppose now I'm told, my boss says, okay, I want you to build a web application. Okay? So let's add a web application. So I'm going to say add new project, and let's go and do a web application. Web, ASP.NET web application, and I'm going to call it Entity Framework Web. Okay? So it's going to create a web application. I'll just do an empty one, just to keep it simple. And I'll quickly wire up something that is able to go and grab some data and display it. We're not going to dwell too much on here because, you know, we're going to spend a lot of time on MVC. But the whole idea is we have a web application, and the first thing I need to do is in the web application's configuration file, I need to copy this connection string, because every app has to be aware of the connection string independently. So I copied that from app.config, and I'm going to go into this web.config, and I'll just paste the connection string here. Okay, this is one thing I need to do. And the other thing I need to do is, because this is an empty app, it needs to know, or it needs to have the entity framework package. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't know anything about entity framework. And inside of Visual Studio, there is something called the NuGet packages. And NuGet packages is just like a package manager. For those of you who've worked with Node, there's a package manager called npm Node Package Manager. Here we have something called NuGet. So what I do here is I right click on this and I say manage NuGet packages. And then I'll go to browse and I'll say entity framework. Here it is. I just need to install this in the web application. Otherwise it won't be able to work. Now that I have it, let me display. I think I have all the pieces in place. I just need to create a page and show you that it's going to work. Oh, the one thing also that we didn't do a reference, right? We need to do a reference into the library. I don't know if I did that. Add reference. I didn't do that. So I have to add a reference from the web, from the library into the web app. So now I think I have everything in place. Let me add a page. I'm going to say add web form, and let me call it default, okay? It's going to be a default page. I'm going to go into the design view, and I'm going to quickly wire up something that allows me to connect to the database. So now I'm going to, in the data, I'm going to get this grid view, drag and drop a grid view here. And this grid view, I'm going to give it the name GV categories. Okay? Now, I'm going to copy this code. Quite honestly, I can copy this code and use it in the web app. It's the same code. So here's my web app. Okay, it's got the page load method. I'm going to copy this, and probably this needs to be resolved. It finds the library, and then I can say gv categories dot data source equals to query dot to list. I need to convert it to a list, and then I can say gv categories dot data byte. This is web forms. It's not MVC. If you did any web forms, you probably know how this works. So now let's run this, see if it's going to work. When you run this, it needs to start a web server. Okay? Come on. That's taking a bit too long. Yeah, but it works. Okay? So what did we learn here? We have a library that can serve multiple applications. And you maintain that library in one place, or the data model in one place. That's a good idea. Okay, so now let's continue. I'm going to now not talk anymore about the web, but in the library, let's say I decided, you know what, I need to add another entity here. I just chose categories, but now I want products. How do I get the products in there? It's very simple. You right-click on the model surface here, and then there is this generate database from model. Choose that. No, sorry, I made a mistake. It's not generate database from model, it's update model from database. So update model from database. So it will go back and bring you the entities that are not in your model. You see, it doesn't show me categories because category is already there. So I want products. So I'll just say products and finish. So it's going to bring the products and add it. And you will notice something interesting. It knows that products is related, oops. Let me bring this up. You see, it knows that there's a relationship between category and products. There's a one-to-many relationship. You can see this 1, 0, 1 to star. One-to-many relationship. So let's build this one time, and then we'll inspect the classes that were created. Let me go down. Wait, it's still building. Okay. Now that I think it built it. So now let's go to the model here, and notice now, in addition to category, we have product. So both of these entities are represented. Let's look at category. Category has been made a little bit more complex than what it was before, because the relationship has been modeled into the class. You see here, the category class, it indicates that it's got a collection of products. In other words, there's a one-to-many relationship between category and products. Okay. What about product? Let's look at product. When you look at product, these are all the columns in the product table, and then down here, there's a link between the product and the category table. You can think of this as being a foreign key. A foreign key from the products table into the category table. Okay? Now, let's go back to the model. And we look back to the model, notice down here, in the navigation properties of the product, it's got the foreign key, which is category. And then in the navigation properties of the category, there is products. So they are linked. Now let's do something with this. Let me go back to the command line application over here. Okay? You remember this, where we were playing? Now let me comment this out, and let us create a method here that displays all the products that belong to a category. I want to know how many products are beverages, for example. One of the columns is beverage, is one of the categories beverage. So let's create another method here. Private static void display categories, sorry, display products by category. Okay, and we'll pass it the category name. Category name. So here I can do something like this. By the way, I'll take this one. This one, I think, so it doesn't get repeated over and over again. What I'll do is I'll promote it to be a class variable. So I'll paste it here and make this static. So I can use it. I don't have to repeat myself. I'll just delete it from here too. Do I have it anywhere else? No. Okay. So over here, I can probably, I'll do my own query now. I'll say var query equals to from p in database.products. Here it is. Where p dot category dot category name equals to this category name that's being passed. Select new p dot product name, comma, p dot unit price. Do we have unit price here? Yes. Comma, p dot category name. Okay. So what I'm essentially doing here is I'm doing a join, and I don't even think that it's a join. You're getting data from two tables. Some from the product table, some from the category table, and you're navigating between them. That's one of the beauties of entity framework or any of these object relational models. By the way, they exist in every language, in Java, in PHP, and all that, these languages. You don't have to do joins. Think of them as objects and navigate through them one from the other. And the join happens naturally. Okay? So let me display this. I'll take one of these. So this would be I dot product name. We have category name, and we have unit price. Let's say this is unit price. Okay, so let's run this. So here I'm going to, for category name, I'll put beverages. Oops. There you go. I'm getting all the beverages, as you can see here. These are all beverages. Beverages, beverages, beverages. Okay? So this is interesting, that I can navigate from one entity into another when I have a relationship. Okay? So the next thing is, we did not look at stored procedures, right? We can do stored procedures too. So let's go back to the model and see how stored procedures are handled here. I'm going to go and update the model from the database. And here are my stored procedures. Let me grab one of them. This last one, 10 most expensive products. Finish. Now, so let me compile. Remember, every time you change the model, do a compilation, otherwise it will not find it. Now, while it's compiling here, I'll just tell you how stored procedures are handled in Entity Framework. Stored procedures are handled just like any method. It becomes a method. Okay? So now let me come back to my program here. And let me comment that out and create another method. Private static void say 10 most expensive products stored procedure proc. Okay? So if I want to access that, var query equals to the database dot, if I type in 10 here, you see it found this. It just finds it. It's just a function, a method. And then let me open this and see, you see here, this doesn't take any arguments. But if it takes any arguments, it would show you. And just by looking at the signature of the method, you can determine what arguments to give it. So this is it. But I don't really know what it's going to return because I have no idea what this stored procedure does. So I'm going to just iterate through it. Okay, let's see now. It doesn't have product name, but let me type this here and, oh, I can see that it has this column, 10 most expensive products. And then, what else does it have? It's got unit price. It doesn't have any third column. This particular stored procedure, it just returns 2 columns. So in that case, let me do some adjustment here. I don't have this. And I don't have this last column here. 10 most, oh, we don't have this unit price. It's repeated. We just need one of those. Okay. So now, let us call this method. Oops. Input string was not in the correct format. What did I do wrong?
Two curly braces, no -T1.
Oh yeah, sure, thank you. Okay, so that works. We just called a stored procedure on the server. Let us create our own stored procedure. So over here, I created a sample stored procedure here that we can use. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this. And I think I have SQL Server Management Studio. So let me use SQL Server Management Studio to go and create a stored procedure on the server. I should be able to do that. And I'll just use it. Just to show you that you can create stored procedures and it's very easy to use them. Okay, so now over here, databases, expanding, taking a bit of time because there are a lot of them. So where is the Northwind database? Here it is. And then under programmability, you have your stored procedures. So let's add a new stored procedure. And let me paste this here and execute it. So now I've created the stored procedure. If I come here and I refresh, this is the stored procedure that I created. Category insert proc. There was one from before called category insert, but the one I created is category insert proc. That's the one I just created. me close this from here. And then now, if I want to use this, of course, I have to go into my model and add it. So under stored procedures, category inserts proc. So let me add this, and then I'll use it to insert something. It's this category insert proc, it inserts something into the database. Because if you look at the syntax here, you see this is the syntax: insert into categories this category name and description. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing in a moment. So now that it added it, let me compile once. Okay, what is it doing here? So now let's use it. Let me go into my command line app, and let's do another method here. This method will be very much like this one here, but never mind, we'll do a new one. Private static void, let us say insert categories, insert category stored proc. And by the way, we can pass it 2 arguments. It takes 2 arguments. We might as well pass it. So go string the name, the category name, comma, string description. So here I'm going to say var query equals to db dot category insert proc. Here it is. And when I open the brackets, it tells me what it expects. It wants a name, category name and description. So I can guess here what it wants. Name, comma, description. Okay? So now let me call it. So I'm going to call this method insert. Let me pass it a category name, let's say fruit, comma, and then let us say pears. Just to show that it has inserted it, I'm going to display this. I'm going to display all the fruit. No, sorry, never mind this. This is products. Let me just bring one of these to display everything. Okay? So we can see that it's been inserted. Oh, this is sorted by, it's very hard to find. So I'm just going to reverse the sorting because I want it to be at the very bottom. So this display categories using lambda syntax. Let's go back to this one. Go to definition. Lambda syntax. I'm not going to order by anything. So I can see it at the very bottom. And now let me use something else. Let me use, for example, banana. Okay. So this is the pears and the bananas are right here. So I use the stored procedure. Any questions about what we covered? Now the only remaining thing is to show you how to do the other CRUD operations. The create, update, and delete. How do we do those? Okay. So let's comment these out. And let us do an insert. Private static void, and I'm going to say insert category. And I'm going to insert these same two things. Okay? And to do an insert is to insert an object. If I ask you to insert an object into a collection, what do? You basically instantiate an object and add it to the collection of that object, right? This is what you normally do. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to instantiate a category object. So I'll say, let's say var category. In fact, let me just give it a category class. Category, and let me say category to add equals to new category. So what we'll do is we'll say category name equals to let's say we'll say pop, okay, and description equals to 7 up. 7 up. That's what I want to enter. So now if I want to insert this, I have to get hold of the collection of categories. The collection of categories is nothing but db.categories.add. I'm going to add this category to add to it. Okay? So what did I do? I instantiated a category. I got hold of the categories collection. I'm just adding that to it. And now to do the final save, all you do is db.save changes. Okay, and that's it. That will solve that problem. So let us do this. Let me take this one. Oh, I shouldn't say 7 up, by the way. I should put name here. So I forgot that I'm actually using arguments here. So let me call this. Okay, so let's do the same thing, pop and 7 up. Pop and 7 up. And then let me display these again so I can see them. Okay, there you go. You have pop and 7 up right here. Okay, so the next thing is we did add. What about update? How do we update? So let's create another method here. Let me comment these out. And private static void, and I'll say category, the update category, update category. And when I update a category, I probably want to update it by ID, right? Int, I want to pass the ID, and I want to then also pass the name and the description. So now, to update a category, what is the first thing we need to do? We need to find something to update. You need to find it. You cannot update unless you find something and say, okay, this is what I want to update. So here again, you'd go category, and I can say category to update equals to from C in database.categories, where C.category ID equals to ID, select C. Now because I know that there's just one of these, okay, what I can do is I can surround this with brackets, and I can say dot single or default, because I'm the programmer. I know I'm searching by primary key. I know that there's only one of these, so I can actually decide that, yeah, it's a category that I'm finding. So having done that, I can say category to update dot category name equals to name category to update dot description equals to description. And now that I changed it, the last thing I do is just say save changes. So I can say database dot save changes, and that's it. That's how you update. Okay, so let's try this. Before I try that, let me just display some things over here to know what the IDs are. I know, for example, down here that this fruit banana is 34. Okay, so let me grab this 34 and change it to something like grapes. Okay, so over here, I'm going to use this one here. So I'm going to choose 34, and the name, I can change it. I don't need to change this to anything really, but I'm just going to keep it as fruit. And the description, I'll make it grapes or strawberries. Strawberries. And then let's display it again. So here we go, we change it to strawberries. Okay. And the last thing is to delete. And delete is always easy, because when I delete, I can delete by primary key. ID, send the ID, grab the thing, delete it. And by the way, delete is very similar to update, because in order to delete, you have to find and then you delete. So I'm going to copy this chunk of code and I'll repurpose it, the update. So this one, I'm going to call it delete category. And then all I need to do is pass the ID. This code is the same. Now, the thing to do is, we'll say category to delete. Let's call it to delete. Okay? So when you add, what you do is you get the collection and you add to the collection. When you delete, it's very similar. You get the collection and you remove from the collection. Okay? So I'm going to get the collection. I'm going to say db.categories.remove. Remove this category to delete. Okay? And then save changes. Okay? So let me repurpose. This one should be delete. No. So if I run this, I think 34 will be gone. So you see now, there's a gap here, 34 is gone. It's been deleted. Okay? So, do you have any questions? This pretty much wraps up what I wanted to talk about. Yes?
We cannot add anything with the number 34 after that, after we delete it, right?
Because the category ID is an identity column, the ID is auto-generated, so you can't. That column is auto-generated. Yes. 34, you cannot reuse it. Okay?